My name is Ken Richard. I'm the EVP and General Counsel of YTEL. YTEL is a telephone infrastructure company, and we are located in Orange County, California. So we provide call center software, infrastructure, support, which includes dialing, inbound, outbound. Also have an SMS product, which we are incorporating into the product. The reason why this is relevant to us is because, in my case anyway, I sit right in the middle of the compliance issues and the technology issues. So when subpoenas come in from different regulatory agencies or state agencies or predatory plaintiff lawyers, I get the subpoenas. So I'm sitting between one side, our customer typically, the third-party stakeholder who is interested in who is in compliance or not in compliance, and the government. So it's an interesting position for me. I have relationships with different governmental agencies, and it's a unique perspective. We don't have a dog in the hunt, but we have to comply with the government, of course, and we will talk more about that. Donna, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Donna Busella. I'm the President of Compliance for Guidepost Solutions. We are a company that does compliance reviews, monitorships, and make sure that people work with the government. We are a unique company in that many of us work for many government agencies and actually led government agencies on compliance. And so I have the unique insight. I came from a company where I was a chief compliance officer that I joined when they were had some issues with the government, every government agency. Fortunately, one or two government agencies decided to take a look at us as opposed to all of them. So hopefully I'll be able to share some of my experiences with you today.
Tony?
Hi, and I'm Tony Paterno. I'm the VP of Operations at Performline. Prior to joining Performline, I spent more years than I'd care to admit overseeing onshore and offshore contact centers, both inbound and outbound, B2B and B2C. And so hopefully I can share some of my history and find knowledge in that area with you today.
Okay, so we got a short time here, a lot of material to cover. So let's break it down into three parts. One, let's talk first about the threshold issues when you're talking about a call center. What are the threshold issues insofar as compliance is concerned, opt-ins, those types of things? So let me throw it over to Donna. What are some of the things that we have to think about? If you have a call center, what are the threshold issues that we're talking about on a call center as far as contacting a third party? Maybe you've had contact or not with them in the past.
Well, we have a regulation called the TCPA, for starters. That means that we can't call people that don't want to be called. They have to opt in. And the way we have to do it is we have to make sure that many of you, I know, for anybody that has a phone in their house still, the only people that call on my phone, I pick up the phone, delay, 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 and then a voice comes on. It's a robocall. Click. So that's the first thing you have to think about. Then it's the content. Tony, the content of the conversations.
Well, yeah, so obviously from an agent standpoint, the agents want to be compliant. The agents don't have an incentive necessarily to break the rules. They don't want to break the rules. But, you know, in terms of marrying regulation with the agents, you need to make sure that not only the call center folks, but the legal team, the compliance team, the marketing team, and your whole organization understands how to take those regulations and implement them both operationally and technically, right? So the robo-dialer does what it's supposed to do. So your agents say what they're supposed to say. And then you use some sort of technology around agent quality monitoring and speech analytics to deploy that. You'll be successful if you do it. If all those pieces don't fit together properly, it's this tremendous friction that has a negative business impact.
So let's circle back a little bit on those threshold compliance issues. So when we talk about TCPA, we're talking about the governmental agency on the federal level that regulates the ability for a call center using an auto dialer to call. Now that could be with agents on the other end who will pick up, like Donna mentioned, and we all know when they're coming, right? There's a little delay, there's clicking, we know it's coming, and most of us don't even get to the point where the call is connected. That's typically an auto dialer, and it might be dialing at ratios of 10 to 1, 20 to 1, 50. I've seen 50 to 1. So they're sending out 50 calls at one time and hoping that one calls up, and the call typically will route to an agent. So those are massive calls. So where does compliance come from a threshold perspective if you're particularly in a marketing company and you don't have opt-in? The advice I would give to you is that you want to make sure you know where your data is coming from. And from Whitel, we've had all kinds of customers, from the cowboys to just, you know, crazy people who are just trying to sequentially dial. That's a no-no. I'm sure you all know that. If you're going to have lists, if you're in a marketing company, you want to make sure you know where your list is coming from and where that data is coming from. Is it scrubbed? Is it DNC compliant? Is it otherwise compliant? You have to have a lot of trust in that, because compliance begins and stops with the data that you have. If you have good opt-in data, you shouldn't have any problem. If someone challenges it, a lot of times people will sign up and they don't even know they're opting in. That's a whole different conversation for another time. But technically, if they've opted in, you're in good shape. You just show the opt-in record. You should have good records as far as opting in, when they opted in, how, however, whatever method you might do that. But your data, where you get your data and what your customer base is and who they are, is critically important from a threshold TCPA compliance issues. Now, when we're talking about compliance on a threshold, from a threshold perspective, there's several agencies that might be involved. Of course, you have the federal government,
The Department of Justice, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Federal Trade Commissions, as well as the CFPB.
that's at the federal level. Then you have individual state agencies as well who regulate calling, right? So as I mentioned earlier, I get all the subpoenas. I know a lot of these folks. I've been dealing with them for years. We're on first name basis with them. I know what they're looking for. They really are looking for habitual violators. If there's just some call, listen, if you're dialing 1 million numbers and a few get through and they're not technically compliant, they're not going to get too excited. And Donna, you probably know that working for the DOJ, right? You're not excited about that. It's when there's a habitual, intentional process to evade the law because they're greedy or whatever. That's what's going to get you in trouble. No one in this room is like that, I'm sure. Positive of
We're
that.
speaking all hypotheticals, but
We are, of course.
It's really the hard sell. It's the boiler room. It's no different than when I was prosecuting boiler rooms. It's how do you hook them in and force them to buy whatever product it is. And that's where we get into some of the problems, because that's when the misrepresentations start.
That's right. So we're still at the threshold level. So the emerging technology, of course, is SMS. Though SMS has been around for 20 years, the preferred method of communication is evolving toward SMS. TCPA does cover SMS. There was a memo that came out a couple of years ago, I think it was 2014, that specifically indicated TCPA would be addressing, is applicable to SMS. So it's treated no differently than a call. So if there's an auto dialer, and I know that word isn't really applicable necessarily to an SMS, but if it's under the FCC definition of what an auto dialer is, if it's an automated type of SMS that goes out, the TCPA applies to that. So you have a whole different regulatory protocol for that as well. You have not only the governmental compliance on the call center side for SMS, but you have carrier compliance as well. Carriers won't carry your traffic if it's involving, they have an acronym called SHAFT, sex, hate, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. If the messages have anything to do with that, the carriers will shut it down. It has nothing to do with the government. So there's all kinds of compliance on the SMS, but that's evolving. Long codes, short codes, those types of things will be involved with the call center. So that's kind of the threshold. Takeaway is make sure you know where your data is coming from and make sure it's scrubbed. And if you have prior relationships with your customers, you're probably in good shape because at some point you had opt-in. Tony, let's shift a little bit to the content of actually how we manage and what are the issues that once you met the threshold issue now, you have nice compliant data, you're talking to your customers. What are the issues that come up in the call center that this group needs to know about?
So, as I'm sure everybody in this room knows, call centers, you have a couple hundred, couple thousand, 10,000 people on the phone, 24/7, now all over the world, right? And the challenge is making sure that those hundreds or thousands of people do the same thing the same way every time, right? And it's a relatively transient workforce. You're always hiring new agents, and agents are leaving, and they're coming and going, and part-time. And so what very quickly happens is everybody's best intentions, we're going to implement the technology, we're going to have a world-class training program, and then the agent hits the floor and reality sets in, because now somebody's yelling at them on the phone and something didn't go right, and somebody's yelling that, why are you asking me for my information again? I just typed it in the phone, and on and on and on. And then there's the agent sitting next to him who's been doing it for 6 months and says, oh yeah, whatever they told you in training, that's not the way you get people to sign up for your credit card or your mortgage or your online university, or this is what you say instead, right? And the tribal knowledge that circulates on the floor becomes the de facto way things are done. And undoing that is, it's like
Hard.
pushing the rock up the hill, right? And it rolls back down again. So that's the environment. And whether, with how everything's moving with technology and chat and SMS and all that stuff, the phone's not going to go away, right? So you're still going to have agents, right? Maybe they're utilized differently, maybe they're deployed more strategically, but they're still going to exist. So, how do you make sure, and the challenge becomes, and the best organizations sort of try to always solve for this, have we aligned regulation, scripting? Are we good at creating our scripts? Are we, doing all of our A/B testing, and are we using speech analytics to sort of align compliance also with the stuff that has the best business outcome, converts more customers, generates more leads, whatever it might be, so that sort of tribal knowledge, or that guy, who's been there for 6 months, who thinks he knows it better than everybody else, doesn't all of a sudden start to, that message spreads towards throughout the call center floor, and then all of a sudden you're not as compliant as you thought you were.
So some of our speakers, like our keynote speaker said, when people do bad things, it's learned behavior. And I just heard another speaker talk about, if you're in a company and you have a call center, the executives really need to sit down and listen to the calls. And so a prior company that I was with, I went and said, that was the first thing I did. I said, get me into the call center, I want to hear it. And you have to listen for a long time, because they're trying to build up rapport, whatever. And then you start hearing some things and you think, oh my God, this is outrageous. So I'll make a pitch, because PerformLine is how I got to know Alex and the people here. I called him up and I said, I need an automated way to go through and check, third party, check those calls, because I had a little bit of a tribal group going on. They had cheat sheets. Don't use the training, use our sheets. They're better, they're faster, they're greater. And so Alex and I would sit down. I said, okay, so we were in a company where we were selling a service. I'll just leave it as that. So I said, okay, these are the words I want for you to search. Automated, so I can just key it up and then see it. Lazy, stupid, cheap, free. Don't worry, you'll get a job. It'll pay 3 times your salary. Don't worry about it. It's great, it's wonderful. Don't be a loser. You have no education, how are you going to get a job? We hit pay dirt, and unfortunately, I was aware that it was happening. I will say this, from the call center standpoint, was one thing about morale. From the people on my team that did compliance and listened, they were outraged. They were so frustrated. So there's turnover on both ends, because how do you get people to do what's right to do? But there are ways in which you can do it. Again, it's the scripting, it's the vigilance that you have to have in overseeing the call centers. I'm not saying all call centers are bad. They're all very good. The problem that we have, even with the best intentions, is when people go off script. Look, it's like telling a story. You always have to throw in some extra facts. It makes it more interesting, but for God's sakes, don't do it when you're selling something to the public, because that's when the Federal Trade Commission comes in and says, you've just made several misrepresentations. Oh, wait a second, this isn't a one-off anomaly. This is intended behavior that your company is doing. And so how do you kind of unravel that? We're
off these threshold issues. We're into the application. Tony, let me go to you on, Donna referred to some of the technology in order to govern what actually goes on with these rogue agents.
Right.
So why don't you let the audience know about what technologies currently exist and what might be coming down the road?
Sure. So speech analytics, quite frankly, when I was overseeing call centers, wasn't a thing and wasn't a just, speech in itself, voice was, if the IVR, if you could say you say the number 1 and versus the number 2, and the phone understood what you were saying, that was a win. We've come a long way, obviously, since then. So there's all sorts of speech analytics offerings. Ours is certainly one of them, but there's many out there. They come in all shapes and sizes and all different flavors that I would say from a quality monitoring standpoint, if you're not using something like that where you could listen to a bunch of calls at scale, look for some of the buzzwords that Donna pointed out or whatever makes sense for your business. That's where you have it's time. All the technology's there. It's reasonably inexpensive, and it's time to implement it if you're not there yet. The other thing it can do for you when done right, and we have many examples of this, and our folks in the lounge over there can talk to you more about it one-on-one, is how it gets leveraged to achieve sales throughput, to have a positive financial outcome, retain a customer by observing and sharing best practices. So speech analytics isn't just a sort of compliance thing by itself. It's very important there too, but it's also an agent performance tool. And then along with that, there's all sorts of screen capture technologies, sentiment analysis, and you've heard people talking about through the last couple of days how things like machine learning and artificial intelligence and sort of novel ways of creating different models in that space can be used to achieve these same things, and that's certainly how things are progressing.
Yeah, I was going to just, maybe if you can expand on that. What do you see coming down the road as far as future technologies? Things are changing so quickly, aren't they? As far as technology is concerned, I mean, our phones change every year or half a year or whatever. So in this space, what do you see as far as maybe AI is concerned that might be coming down the pipe?
So I don't know how many people have seen, it's been in the media over the last couple weeks where Google can now make you dinner reservations, right? I don't know if anybody's seen that. It's getting better and better and better. So to the extent that, and it's natural language processing and it's machine learning and it's a bunch of different things done a bunch of different ways without boring everybody with the technical details of it, to the extent that you can leverage those sorts of things, right? And have an automated solution to solve customer problems, and then you only move to the live human being for the more esoteric, more complicated things, well, you've also solved a whole bunch of compliance problems. You've also solved the problem of the agents going off script and having cheat sheets and things like that. So as that gets better and better, that I think is certainly where things are going, that the automation and the actual conversations and the automated attendant on the other end getting better and more nuanced and more sort of subtle about what people are saying and how they're saying it and why they're saying it and what they're looking for is an opportunity for sure.
Okay. So let's shift. We get about 10 minutes left. So I want to talk about the consequences of non-compliance, right? So we talk about compliance. First thing is, compliance is good business. And at Whitel, if you walked into my office, and I invite you all to come have lunch with us someday in Orange County, California, come out and you'll see on my whiteboard I have, "It's the compliance, stupid," and I have it up in quotes because I want people in our organization to understand that that's what our DNA is. We're not just selling traffic, we're not just selling technology. We want our customers to grow and be successful. If they're not compliant, they're not going to be my customer very long, right? So it's in everyone's interest to make sure that everyone is compliant. So compliance is very, very critical, as big, no kidding, right? Ken, what are you talking about? It's good business on top of it. If you're not compliant, all kinds of bad things can kind of happen. And as I mentioned, I'm kind of sitting in the catbird seat watching all that. So you have a lot of different areas that people will attack. Certainly the FCC and FTC will come after you depending on how non-compliant, how intentionally non-compliant you might be. But also, there's a whole class of predatory class action lawyers out there that are just waiting. And I bet people, I was at this conference last year, sitting in your place. I didn't speak last year. And I asked a question about what the government was doing. Donna, maybe you remember that. I asked, what is the government doing to recognize that they have no interest in worrying about predatory class action lawyers who are attacking businesses? No interest at all. So it's going to be up to you to take care of yourself on that. If you're not in compliant, and you're routinely not in compliant because you're not, this is from a TCPA level, and we'll get into the FTC, you'll get what is called, you'll get sued in a class action. It's a whole industry out there. It's terrible. They use the TCPA, I see people nodding. They use the TCPA as a weapon. They weaponize the TCPA to go after small businesses and shake you down. I was saying earlier, I had several people, when I asked that question, come up to me after and say, yeah, I just paid $2,000 to get this guy off my back. Of course, which just reinforces the whole problem, right, when you capitulate to that. Another reason to be very, very compliant. When the FTC, I was circling over Virginia 2 nights ago, like maybe a lot of you were, okay, I'm seeing people, and before they put us down on the tarmac and made us wait for 3.5 hours without getting off the plane, different story, I had an FTC receiver blowing my phone up, demanding information. So the government, when they choose, and Donna can speak to this, when the DOJ or someone wants to come after you, I'm not trying to scare you, just trying to tell you the implication of not being compliant, they come after hard. If they have a mission to come after, they're coming after you. And this guy was blowing my phone up because I was like, he gave me a 5-day notice to give him information. I have to turn customer information over to them when they subpoena me. Who the subscriber is, what the call records are, those types of things. And, you know, it was like a 5-day notice over the weekend. Of course, we didn't get to it. He's asking for records from forever ago. And he's just going crazy. So I'm on the phone trying to get to my technical people to try to set them information. It was just, they're on a mission. And so it's very consequential. Donna, maybe you can talk about that from a government perspective.
The other thing, too, is, and I don't think people realize, that the government, you know, for as sometimes illogical, why can they do this, as I always say to a CEO, because they can. You know, there's meetings at DOJ, especially in the civil fraud section, and it's with every federal agency and the state AGs, and it's a monthly meeting. And so if they're going to go after an industry, and that's usually what the state AGs do, they pick an industry. So they can pick, you know, for-profit education, car insurance, mortgages, loans, every topic. Then they decide, okay, who's going to handle this one? Publicly traded, SEC, you can handle that one. Not publicly traded, well, okay, FTC, you handle that. They take turns. And you will find, even in some of the settlement documents, that maybe the CFPB wants, they want this term put in the settlement agreement. And so it's a collaborative, it's finally the government works together, right hand, left hand. It's collaborative. But what ultimately happens is not only do you have to deal with the civil lawsuits, or perhaps a QTAM, False Claims Act, where somebody who says, oh, they've done something bad, you then have to worry about settlement costs. Oh, and then if you're really fortunate, then you might have to pay for a monitor. So, you know, the cost of non-compliance is just pretty much outrageous. And so trying to get companies and CEOs to realize that, you know what, this is not just one of those things that check the box we have to have. This is something that really needs to be done, and everybody has to be done, because you're going to save lots of money in legal fees. So that's, you know, it is really a collaborative effect.
So then after you've gone through that root canal, right, your agents are left now feeling that, well, I work in this place that broke the law or did something wrong, or where I work sucks, or the company, like, bad. So that morale, you know, this mentors of mine in the call center space, they'd always tell me with the agents, like, you know, don't spook the herd, right? Like, don't, like, just, you got to implement things slowly. So the herd is now spooked, right? So got a ton of turnover, right? Got to hire a whole bunch of new people, and what goes south right away are your KPIs, right? Like, we had a conversion rate here, it's here, right? And it's not because we changed the script, it's because the morale on the floor just did a nosedive. And undoing that is months of getting those KPIs back to where they were beforehand. So, not to, you know, there's the fines, and there's a regulatory scrutiny, and there's all of that. But then there's also the effect it has on your business afterwards. And you're gonna sell less stuff?
You know, there's nothing that we're trying to do to scare you. So it may come across that way, but we're on a compliance conference, so we're talking about compliance and what compliance means and how it will affect you if you do it and if you don't do it. My takeaway, being a technology company, provided technology to call centers with SMS, we do ringless voicemail. Oh my God, people be crazy. You can do it compliantly, believe it or not. We can drop voicemails into a cell phone box, which we'd all hate. We can do that, but you can do it compliantly. I guess what I would like to say is there's nothing that Donna or Tony want. We don't want to scare you or do anything. We want to emphasize that compliance is good business. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yep.
And it's worth it up front to be diligent about it. We talked about, you heard, I think it was Frank or somebody in the other room, if you heard the speech, talking about developing a culture within the company of compliance. And if you develop that culture of compliance, your business, you're going to make a lot more money. And you're going to save money by not having to mitigate problems, but the customers who you're reaching, whether they're existing customers or potential customers, are going to be interested in talking to you. And you're not going to aggravate them. If you're calling people who don't want to be talked to, or your scripts are wrong, or you have a rogue agent, it's just bad business. So by doing it right, you're going to make a lot more money.
And also, when you have people that care about their company and they have pride in their company and they're all compliant, they're going to be driving the performance. You'll get your operators really like jazzed up about it. And look, most companies that I've seen, some of them don't have compliance programs, and you go in and you think, oh my God, this is a company I've known about. What do you mean they don't have a compliance program? But you know what? It's an education process. It really is. You have to go in there thinking that, this is not, if you don't do this, you're going to get in really bad trouble. It has to be, tell me about your operations. Oh my God, did you ever think about this? And they're looking at you like, you're the compliance people. That's like the lawyers. They could just go stay over there. But if you get yourself involved in the operations and get them jazzed up and get them to talk about their best practices, you will see morale just like totally go around. It'll be the positivity will just really help the business.
Yeah, and I completely agree. The only thing I would add to that or reiterate is developing that culture isn't just the responsibility of the call center director or the call center operator. It's the responsibility of legal and compliance and marketing and technology to make sure that everything works the way it's supposed to and the agents believe in the technology. And if organizationally all those departments, and to Donna's point, maybe make all of those departments listen to some calls every once in a while, if all those folks are aligned in sort of what that mission is, we have compliance obligations, but obviously we have performance targets and KPIs that we're trying to hit, it makes it much easier to be successful.
And make sure the C-suite's driving that train, or at least being there with the message, because that will go a very long way.
We're just about out of time. We are available. We'll be around if you'd like to talk to us. We're more than happy to drill down on some specific questions that you have about whatever it is we talked about, or even things beyond that scope. So we thank you for your attention, and unless anyone has anything else, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the panel. You've all been great eye contact. You're all kind of engaged with us, and we really appreciate being here with you today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.